Hi, my name is Tristan Field and I'm a proud First Nations person on my dad's side, and on my mum's side I'm also a very proud Sri Lankan person. I like to pay respects to the traditional custodians of the lands that we gather on today and where you are watching this right now. I like to pay respect to the elders that are past and present and the ones that we have here still on this earth, because they hold the values, they hold the knowledge, and they hold the stories. Like you're about to learn today, this is all about culture, this is all about sharing, and this is all about storytelling. Thank you for being here.
Super quick intro for this one. I just wanted to acknowledge the immense privileges from which I get to ask this question, and many of us get to answer it. Make sure you watch to the end because there's some really interesting perspectives in this one. As always, like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts down below. Enjoy episode 8. What does it mean to be Australian?
Being Australian means living on stolen land. That's a huge part of what it means to be Australian. Being Australian has only existed for maybe 200 years, whereas what was here before that existed for tens of thousands. So being Australian to me is a responsibility to understand the history of this land and the people who have cared for it that we are all now living on.
I think it used to mean not Tamil, not queer, but a new Australia is emerging where we are all free to exist.
To be unapologetically yourself, which is really interesting to me because I would say the same about being South Asian.
To appreciate our diversity and the freedoms that we have in this country.
Giving things a go, and also mateship, so you are there for your community, for your friends, pulling them along when times are tough.
Australia has a famous phrase, give everyone a fair go. Even though Australians haven't given first Australians a fair go, this underlying philosophy is what I like about Australian philosophy.
The sound of a magpie in summer, it's also the fear of being swooped by a magpie in summer. It's bin chickens, it's a hot meat pie, it's beaches, but it's also bush. It's walking on hot pavement without any shoes on, the smell of a barbecue, it's a lot of laughter, it's about resilience, it's about mateship.
To see the diversity is one of the most beautiful things. You come to Sydney, each area has its own culture and its own mini ecosystem going on, so that's one of the best things about being Aussie, and you get to throw on the word mate and a few other swear words without hurting anybody's feelings.
Confident, loving, being able to be yourself.
Freedom, sense of pride, sense of belonging. We sometimes forget how it is to live outside Australia, how much of struggle people go through.
Going along with things, being really laid back, just taking things easy and having a good old time.
Honestly, nothing. Doesn't mean anything to be Australian.
Unless you're from a First Nations or Indigenous background, it's a construct. Let's be real, it's a country full of people from around the world who just came to an island that was inhabited. So focus on the values, not the kind of legal fiction that is Australian. That is the concept of mateship and camaraderie, like whether it be a car breaking down on a highway, the instinct of Aussies to kind of stop and check in. Or even that international food fair, we're in grade 3, where you've got my mum's kurma right next to fairy bread, right next to a sweet that my Filipino friend brings in. That's what Australia is to me. It's not a static thing. Keep those values, but the form will keep changing.
I think that question is evolving. What does it mean to be Australian probably has changed over the years, but I think for me what it means is be proud of a unifying identity that connects us all, but never shy away from the fact that Australia is a country of migrants and we all have our own rich cultural histories to draw back on, and acknowledge that as a group we're all stronger because of that diversity. We can definitely draw on some lessons there.
When I was growing up, I used to imagine an Australian person as a white Australian person. Like that's the image in my head that I would have first thought of. Really, when I lived abroad and my children, people were questioning them being Australian. I remember clearly having a conversation with my daughter and saying, every Australian comes from some other part of the world. And if a person tells you they're Australian and you're not, you should tell them the only people that could say that are actually Indigenous people, not anyone that has lighter skin than you. I guess when I think of Australia now, it's that multicultural face of Australia that I think of.
To be Australian means having opportunities to do whatever you want. That's why we came to this country, to follow our dreams and conquer the world, it feels like.
To be united, have a laugh, laid back.
Being inclusive and accepting of people as they are.
We're not bound by some of the issues there could be in terms of caste and stuff.
It means to be me.
Is it a cop-out to say I don't know? I don't know, but I do know that I felt very Australian watching the Matildas play.
That's a very tricky question for me. Being a First Nations person and a Sri Lankan person, I never really got to feel like I was an Australian, especially growing up. So the idea of being an Australian is kind of foreign to me still. And then I go overseas, it's like, oh, you're an Aussie. And you're just like, oh, I have a sense of pride when that happens. It's conflicting, it's confusing, because we're still at a stage where I still need to feel like I'm being recognised, my people are being recognised, and my stories are being recognised, because it is still part of Australian history. There's still a ways to go.
This is something I really struggle with. I struggle to say I'm Australian, even though I was born here. I always always say I am Sri Lankan Australian, and I think that is largely due to how I feel as though I was treated in Australia. I was always treated to feel as though I was Sri Lankan Australian.
I decided I was Australian when I went out to Mango National Park. I had a totally unexpected, visceral experience of connection to land. Most of the time that I've spent in Australia, I've spent wanting to get away from Australia. Until we made that trip, I was just walking through there on my own, and it was like I could hear the depths of the water because, you know, ancient times it was the ocean bed. I felt presences that I'd never felt before, and that changed my relationship to this country. And it was from that time that I decided this was where I was supposed to be and that this was home, because I felt like that was the first time I had opened myself enough to hear the land speak to me.
Australia has been about a new chance.
To be whoever you want to be.
I think good sportsmanship is part of being Australian, being friendly, being kind.
It's this lifestyle of just enjoying things as they come.
Opportunity with a lot of privilege and ease and comfort.
Freedom.
To be Australian is defining who you really want to be, and that doesn't mean being a certain cookie cutter person, but it's that combination of different cultures that makes us Australian.
I've never really thought about, I'm Australian, I never really viewed myself like that.
Standing up to a value of egalitarianism. There was a very good example in the film Balabo when the Indonesian authorities killed the journalists in East Timor. The protagonist stood up and said, I am Australian. And what he meant is that as an Australian, he will not take that injustice. That is what being Australian means.
That we bring all of ourselves, all our past, lovingly into our present, remembering the present is made by a past stewarded by Aboriginal people, and that the future really relies on all of us being truthful and loving with each other so that we can live in a just society.
I moved to Australia because I was struggling with my sexuality living in Fiji, and when I moved to Australia, I felt that I could be myself. I wasn't discriminated.
I'm proud. I came from a country where I was not even sure if I'm going to wake up alive tomorrow. Australia opened its hands to me and said, we welcome you, and gave us the freedom to be able to wake up next day and see the sun.
What Australia has given me is the ability to maximize on all the training from brilliant gurus who gave me so much. Unlimited amount of wealth in the form of the arts. All that came to me in a vessel. This is what we have given you, now use it. All that knowledge, all those hours of sweat and tears, of choreography, of composing, of rehearsals, of dancing is what's shaped me in this country. And I think this country is much, much richer for it.
I come from the UK, it's very hierarchical, it's very much about class, it's not about integration, and I find that Australian fair go attitude. There's a lot of diminished class structures, and I kind of really respect that. People want to hear you for you, they want you to turn up for who you want to be, and that welcomeness really does extend to different parts of the country, even though there are people that don't necessarily agree with that, but I think ultimately as an Australian value, it's there, and I think it's really beautiful.
When I left Australia in 2005, and now returning now, those are two very different Australias. There are so many huge progressive steps that we've taken forward as a community and as a society. The fact that Shankari can win an award for a book that was deemed not Australian enough to winning the biggest Australian literature award is the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
What does it mean? Indeed, I've written a whole novel about what it means to be Australian. I think it means to be a part of a complicated country with a colonial history that we haven't fully reconciled with, that has ongoing impacts for First Nations people that we also have not reconciled with. I think it means that whilst we once were told that this is a white country, it is actually a country of multiple identities, and we have it within us to be generous and expansive in our understanding of those identities and our acceptance of those identities that exist simultaneously. And it isn't a white country or a country of one colour, even though it was once and in many ways still is a black country.
Many things to support the underdog, which means not supporting the Australian sports teams a lot of the time. I think it's taking your place in this country and feeling that you belong and listening to First Nations people. Even the name Australia is itself a name that comes out of a particular milieu and context.
I think Australia is very accepting of all cultures, all religions, all types of people. So I think what it means is just that. We love everyone. Just big.
As an Australian, people ask if you're Indian, and I'm like, I'm Australian Indian. I think it's good to rep both, kind of bringing those two together.
What I want it to mean is acceptance, being true to self, and being multicultural in the sense where you don't just say you're multicultural, but you learn to love people for who they are.
Respecting and valuing the land that we live on, the history behind it, and of course being grateful to be let to live in such a country that's something that we migrated into, starting a life for ourselves. So being very grateful and respectful to that.
To truly understand where we fit
assimilate into where we now live. You have to respect the land that you're on, and I think it's really important to educate yourself on the history and what it means for us to be here.
To have a home. As an Ilam Tamil, we don't have somewhere to call home, and this country has given us a home that I'm super grateful for. It's a home that embraces all people, and the lands of this country are just beautiful. The Aboriginal people have really created beautiful lands that we live on, and it's a land that keeps giving.
I'm so grateful to be born in this country. I love being Australian. I hear someone say good day to me. It's like such a feeling that I can't explain. That feeling of warmth, and it'll be okay. Why? Because I'm Australian.
Having the plethora of different people in your daily life makes it a fabulous place to be, and I wouldn't wish to be anywhere else in the world.
Being Australian is actually being many things. It's not just one identity for me.
It's different for each of us. If you are living in the heart of the city, what feels Australian might be different to out in a regional town somewhere.
It is about bringing your full self into your existence on this land. It is such a diverse, multicultural, multi-religious country that it is so difficult to identify what is true Australian other than what our First Nations people can identify with. But I think in the modern day, it's about being comfortable, about being who you are and celebrating everything that it is that makes up you, that defines what it is to be Australian as a person that lives in this country.
For me, it's probably having koth roti on a Saturday and a barbecue on Sunday.